What do you mean? We lost another customer to Ridgeway Mall. That's the third this week. Kellan Lowe rubbed his temples as he leaned back in his office chair, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the boardroom table. The numbers hadn't looked right for weeks. Sales were dipping in 3 locations, customer feedback had grown colder, and 2 store managers had reported unusually high staff turnover. It wasn't a collapse, but something was off. Kellan had built this mid-size retail brand from the ground up after buying it from a retiring couple 8 years ago. 13 stores across 3 states, each one built on the same values: customer care, local trust, and a clean, honest floor. But lately, he didn't recognize his company. He tapped the tablet on the table and scrolled through the customer complaints again. Store 9, again, he muttered. That one had been flagged more than any other: unfriendly staff, slow service, messy aisles. But the district manager's reports painted a different picture: stable traffic, reliable crew, nothing concerning. Kellan wasn't buying it. He stood up, grabbed his coat, and left without another word. The next morning, Kellan stood in front of Store 9 dressed in a faded hoodie, jeans, and aviator glasses. His beard was longer now. He'd let it grow this past month, partly due to stress, partly on purpose. A baseball cap sat low on his forehead. He looked like any 40-something shopper who might have just pulled off the highway for a quick stop. He pushed open the door and stepped into the store. It was worse than expected. Half the shelves near the front were unorganized. A spilled drink sat drying near the cooler. A teen worker leaned against the customer service desk, staring at his phone. No one greeted him. No music played. The place felt tired. He wandered through the aisles, pretending to search for something, anything. A few customers walked past him, equally unimpressed. Then a voice behind him broke the silence. "Need help finding something?" Kellan turned. A young woman stood there, maybe mid-20s, holding a small brown basket with a name tag that read Taryn R. Her hair was pulled back into a simple ponytail, and a pen was clipped to the front of her apron. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharp, alert. Yeah," Kellan said, adjusting his voice to sound unsure. "I'm looking for a charging cord for an older phone. I don't even know the model, honestly. It's my mom's." Taryn smiled. "Hang on. Let's check together." She didn't just point, she walked with him. As they moved, Kellan glanced to his left. The teen at the desk hadn't moved. A man in a button-up shirt, probably the manager, was talking on his Bluetooth headset, laughing. No one else offered help. Taryn crouched near the electronics rack and pulled out 3 different cords. "These are the most common older models. We can try them at the register if you want to make sure it fits before you buy." That's nice of you," he said, surprised. She shrugged. "I've helped a lot of sons trying to figure out their mom's phone. You're not the first," Kellan chuckled. "Is it always this quiet around here?" he asked, trying to sound casual. She paused. "It depends. We've had a lot of people quit lately. Some shifts feel like I'm the only one really working." His eyebrows raised. "Why's that?" Taryn hesitated. "Honestly, some folks just don't care, and the manager, well, he's more about his fantasy football league than the store." "Doesn't anyone say anything?" "I did," she said softly. "Twice. Got told to focus on my own tasks." She stood up again. "Anyway, sorry, didn't mean to dump all that. You just seemed nice." Kellan smiled. "No worries, you've been really helpful. I appreciate it." She nodded and started walking back toward the front. "If you need anything else, just holler. I'll be restocking aisle 4. As she walked away, Kellan's smile faded. He looked down at the cord in his hand, then back toward the front desk where the teen was now tossing a stress ball in the air. The manager still hadn't left his call. He didn't need a full report anymore. He'd seen enough to know the problem wasn't just staffing. It was leadership. Still playing the lost shopper, Kellan browsed a bit longer. He watched Taryn help a confused elderly woman find batteries, then kneel beside a little girl who had dropped her juice box and started to cry. She cleaned the mess up without hesitation, gave the girl a sticker from her apron pocket, and walked her back to her mom. No one else lifted a finger. An hour later, Kellan left the store and sat in his car in silence. He'd never met Taryn before. She'd been hired 2 years ago at a different location and transferred here 6 months back, right around when the complaint started. He'd reviewed her file once, nothing that stood out on paper. But in person, she stood out a lot. He stared at the store through the windshield, 13 stores. But this was where the rot had started, and he knew what came next. He wasn't going to send another email. He wasn't going to call the district manager. He was going back tomorrow, but not as a shopper. As a new training hire. The next morning, a gray sedan pulled into the side lot of Store 9, parking far from the front entrance. Kellan stepped out wearing a navy polo and khakis just like the ones issued to new hires. A clipboard tucked under one arm, a store-issued ID lanyard hanging from his neck. The name read Ken L. It was close enough to his real name to remember, but generic enough not to raise suspicion. He entered through the receiving door in the back, where pallets of inventory sat half unwrapped and a radio played faintly from a dusty speaker near the lockers. No one greeted him right away. The hallway smelled like stale mop water. A tall man with thinning hair and an untucked shirt eventually rounded the corner. He glanced at Kellan, checked the ID lazily, then motioned with his chin. Orientations canceled. Managers out today. Just follow Craig. He's stocking aisle 6. Kellan didn't bother asking who he was. He found Craig crouched among open boxes, scanning barcodes with a handheld device that beeped after every few seconds. He looked to be in his early 20s, with a tired expression and sleeves rolled up past his elbows. When Kellan introduced himself, Craig didn't look up. New hire. Grab an apron from the wall hook. We're behind. Start sorting those canned goods by expiration date, oldest to the front. Kellan nodded and got to work. In his first hour, he learned more than he had in the last month's worth of reports. The backroom inventory was disorganized, with several items shoved into mislabeled crates and others sitting out of refrigeration limits. Craig worked fast but with visible frustration, muttering numbers under his breath every few minutes. No one else came by to help. At one point, a supervisor passed by the aisle without stopping. By noon, the heat in the store felt heavier. The air conditioning clicked on and off irregularly, and the sticky warmth made the canned aisle feel like a greenhouse. Kellan wiped his forehead with the back of his hand and asked Craig where the break room was. Craig pointed with his barcode scanner. Down the hall past the manager's office. You get 15. Better take it now before Taryn gets stuck alone at registers. Kellan paused. She's already on register. Craig stood up with a grunt. She's been up there since we opened. We've only got 3 scheduled today. One called out and the other left early yesterday and hasn't shown since. Kellan didn't say anything. He just nodded and walked toward the break room. Inside, the lights buzzed faintly. A vending machine stood half-stocked against the wall, and a round table sat under a cracked ceiling tile. Taryn was sitting there, leaning over a battered notebook, chewing on the end of a pen. Her apron was still on. Her name tag had a scratch across the corner now. She looked up and blinked when she saw him. "Oh, you're the new guy, right, Ken?" He nodded. "Yeah, just started stocking cans." She laughed once, a short sound. "If you last a week, you'll be the longest new hire we've had this month." Kellan raised an eyebrow. "That bad?" She didn't answer right away. She flipped her notebook closed and leaned back in her chair. "It's not the work," she said finally. "I've worked harder jobs. It's the way things are run here. Or not run." Craig mentioned the schedule's been tight. Taryn rolled her eyes. "Tight would be generous. We're supposed to have 5 on shift. We've had 3 for the last 4 days. Some quit. Some just stopped showing. Nobody replaces them. They just expect the rest of us to pick up the slack." Kellan sat down across from her. "What does the manager say about it?" She looked toward the door, then lowered her voice. "He either blames corporate or says we're lucky to have hours at all. Last week I stayed late to finish restocking frozen goods and he clocked me out without telling me. Said it wasn't authorized overtime." Kellan's jaw tightened. "Did you report that?" "I tried. The district manager told me to work it out with my supervisor." She shook her head. "I stopped trying after that." Before Kellan could respond, the door creaked open. Craig stepped in, grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge and glanced at the clock. "Break's almost up," he said without looking at anyone. Taryn stood and grabbed her apron's string. Back to the grind. Kellan followed them out, but instead of returning to the stockroom, he headed toward the front to observe the floor. The checkout line stretched nearly to the freezer aisle. Taryn jumped behind the first register and began ringing people up with practiced efficiency. Her hands moved quickly, but she still managed to greet each customer, ask if they found everything, and thank them with a smile. The teenage cashier at the second register never showed up. Customers grew impatient. A man with 2 young kids muttered under his breath. An older woman pushed her cart back toward the exit. Kellan stepped behind the unattended register and began scanning items. He was rusty. He'd last used a scanner 15 years ago, but the basics came back quickly. A few customers gave him odd looks, but no one questioned him. By the time the line died down, Taryn walked over and looked at him with amusement. "So, you're not just stocking cans?" "Apparently not." She handed him a bottle of cold water. "You handled it better than most." One guy last week froze up when the scanner beeped wrong and just walked off mid-shift. Kellan took the bottle and nodded his thanks. "Must be tough trying to keep this place running." Taryn shrugged. "I don't mind hard work. I just wish someone above us noticed. Or cared." They didn't get much time to talk after that. A small spill near the pet aisle pulled Taryn away, and Kellan was called back to the stockroom by Craig, who had just discovered a shipment of expired baby formula that had been shoved behind seasonal daycare. The afternoon dragged. The store's phone rang constantly, but no one answered. The office door remained closed. Someone had turned the music system back on, but it played on a loop only 4 songs, repeated every 20 minutes. Kellan caught himself humming the same chorus 3 times in 1 hour. Around 5, a customer began shouting near the pharmacy section. Kellan arrived just as Taryn was trying to de-escalate. The man was red-faced, holding a receipt and an empty pill bottle. "I was told this would be ready by yesterday. Now she tells me I have to come back Monday." Taryn kept her voice calm. "Sir, I understand your frustration, but we don't control the pharmacy's refill schedule. I can call them again if you'd like. I've been here 3 times this week. Same excuse every time." Kellan stepped forward. "Why don't I walk you to the front and get you a gift card for the trouble? We'll make sure someone follows up first thing Monday." The man hesitated, then nodded. As they walked, he muttered less. By the time they reached the registers, he was quiet. After he left, Taryn looked at Kellan curiously. "You're quick on your feet. Most new hires wouldn't try that," he shrugged. "Figured it's better than letting him leave angry." She tilted her head, studying him. "You're not just here to stock shelves, are you?" Kellan smiled faintly. "Maybe I'm just trying to understand how things really work here." She hesitated, then nodded once before walking off to assist another customer. By closing time, the trash bins were overflowing and the floors hadn't been mopped. Craig was still in the back, trying to sort a miscounted shipment. The manager never returned. Kellan stood near the front window, watching the last customer leave. The automatic doors slid closed with a tired whine. Taryn walked over with a clipboard. "That's the closing checklist. I'll handle it. You've done enough for your first day." He looked at her. "You always close alone, lately." "Yeah," she didn't sound bitter, just resigned. Kellan nodded. "See you tomorrow, then." As he stepped out into the cool night air and pulled his jacket tight, he knew one thing for certain: this store wasn't broken because of market pressure or staffing quotas. It was broken because no one in charge had been paying attention. Until now. Kellan returned the next morning just before opening. The sky was still dim, and the parking lot lights buzzed faintly above patches of cracked pavement. The store's main entrance remained locked, but the back door stood slightly ajar, propped open with a piece of cardboard. He stepped inside and was hit by the sharp tang of cleaning chemicals, not from fresh use, but from a mop bucket that hadn't been emptied the night before. Inside the break room, Craig sat hunched over a styrofoam container, eating cold eggs with a plastic fork. He didn't look up. "You're early," he said between bites. "Figured I'd get a head start," Kellan replied, setting his things down on the far corner table. Craig snorted once, not bothered enough to ask why. "You'll be stocking aisle 11 today. New shipment came in late. Nobody touched it last night." Kellan nodded and grabbed his apron from the hook. The warehouse lights flickered as he made his way to the back. Stacked crates leaned against each other at precarious angles, and a few had split open snack boxes and plastic wraps spilling out across the concrete. He began sorting the mess carefully, separating damaged goods from sellable stock. Over the next hour, no one came to help. The only sound was the hum of the refrigeration units and the occasional clang of shifting pallets. By the time he made it to the front of the store, the first customers were trickling in. Taryn was already behind register 2. Her hair was tied into a tighter braid this time, and she wore a long-sleeve shirt under her uniform to ward off the chill that crept in during the early hours. Without glancing up, she moved through transactions with swift precision. A child dropped a box of crackers from a cart, and she bent to pick it up before the mother even noticed. Kellan approached her register during a quiet moment. "Morning," he said. She looked up, eyes a little heavier than yesterday. "Didn't expect you to come back." "I'm stubborn," Kellan said. "Also, didn't want to leave you short." Taryn gave a small laugh, but it faded quickly. "You might be the only one around here who thinks like that." Before either could say more, a voice barked from behind the customer service counter. "Hey, new guy Ken, right? I need you to do carts." Now, the man who spoke wore a wrinkled company polo with the collar turned up. His name badge read Derek Ast, manager. He didn't wait for a response before turning back to his phone. Kellan gave Taryn a nod and headed outside. The morning air had warmed slightly, but the cart corral was a mess. Half the carts were scattered across the lot, some wedged between bumpers. He spent the next 30 minutes collecting them under the watchful eye of passing drivers too impatient to wait for him to clear a path. Back inside, Derek was still leaning against the counter, scrolling. "Next time, don't take so long," he said without looking up. Kellan didn't respond. Instead, he walked straight to the back aisle and resumed stocking. Each shelf he touched was another confirmation. Pricing labels were wrong, outdated promo signs still hung from last month, and several food items were 2 weeks past their sell-by date. Around midday, the manager finally showed up, a short, heavyset man named Vince. He entered through the front, laughing into his phone and carrying a fast food bag in one hand. The smell of fried onions followed him down the aisles. He didn't make eye contact with anyone until he reached the office, where he shut the door behind him and didn't emerge for the next hour. Kellan found Taryn near the frozen section, kneeling beside a broken freezer bin with a hand towel in one hand and a clipboard in the other. "Someone reported a leak," she said without looking up. "Turns out it's been dripping for 3 days, just no one logged it. I'm trying to document everything in case corporate ever decides to care." "You always go out of your way like this?" Kellan asked. "I like doing things right," she said, "even if no one notices." Kellan crouched down beside her. "Has anyone ever said thank you?" She gave a short shake of her head. "Mostly they just ask why I'm wasting time on things that don't matter." He watched as she carefully taped a caution wet floor sign beside the freezer, then jotted down a note on her clipboard. "You ever think about quitting?" he asked. "Every week," she said. "But I've got a younger brother in school. I help pay his tuition, and I'm not the type to leave a mess behind." Kellan nodded slowly. "You're doing more than most managers I've worked with." She gave him a look. "You've had worse, plenty," he said, "but I've also seen what good leadership looks like." She stood and stretched her arms slightly. "Well, if you see any of that around here, let me know." Later that afternoon, a delivery truck arrived unscheduled, carrying a double shipment. No one from management came to assist. Craig was still stuck in the back trying to fix a mislabeled inventory batch, and Taryn was now running both registers as the after-school rush began. Kellan stepped outside to help the driver unload. The man looked surprised. "Didn't think this place had anyone left who gave a damn," he said, handing over the invoice. "Just trying to keep things from falling apart," Kellan said, signing it. By the time they got the last pallet inside, the sun had dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows through the store's front windows. A toddler screamed near the candy aisle while 2 teenagers argued over energy drinks. The floor hadn't been swept. One of the ceiling lights flickered constantly, and the phone continued ringing unanswered. Kellan watched it all from the far end of the store, arms crossed. Then he walked straight to the office door. He knocked once, then pushed it open. Vince looked up from his desk, startled. His computer screen displayed a paused fantasy football page. "You can't just walk in here," Vince said. Kellan stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "I'm going to make this simple. I've been in this store for 3 days now. I've watched you ignore your staff, neglect your responsibilities, and let this store slide into chaos. Vince blinked. Who the hell are you? Kellan reached into his pocket and pulled out his real ID, the one that said Kellan Lowe CEO. Vince stared at it, then back at him. His mouth opened, then closed. Outside, the phone rang again. I bought this company 8 years ago, Kellan said. I've walked every store, met hundreds of employees, but what I've seen here, it's the result of neglect. Yours. Vince stood up slowly. Wait, listen, there's been staffing issues. District don't, Kellan said, holding up a hand. I've read the reports. You've been falsifying coverage logs and overriding clock-out times. You've ignored safety issues, written up employees who spoke up, and haven't made a single effort to fix anything. You're done here. Vince's face drained of color. He sat back down, breathing heavily. Kellan stepped out of the office and walked toward the front of the store. Derek stood by the customer service counter, watching the exchange with narrowed eyes. Craig peeked from the stockroom, confused. Kellan turned toward the registers. Taryn was still scanning groceries, her expression focused, her movements efficient. She didn't notice him approach until he stepped beside her lane. You're off the clock, he said. She looked at him, puzzled. I'm Kellan Lowe, he said quietly. Founder, CEO. Her eyes widened, but she didn't say anything. You've kept this place running, he said. Now it's my turn. He turned back toward the others. Everyone in this store deserves better than what's been allowed here. That changes today. No one said a word. The only sound was the soft beep of the register as Taryn finished the last item in her lane. She looked at him. So, what happens now? The morning after the reveal, Kellan arrived at store 9 2 hours before opening. The parking lot was still empty, the sky streaked with early light. He slipped in through the side entrance and headed straight for the office. Vince wouldn't be there. Security had escorted him out the evening before, but Kellan needed a quiet place to work. The desk was scattered with unopened mail, outdated sales memos, and a half-eaten granola bar that had gone stale against a cold coffee cup. He cleared the clutter, powered on the computer, and opened the internal scheduling suite. The system was bloated with old employee profiles and inactive logins. He spent 40 minutes cleaning the database and cross-checking who was still actually working shifts. The numbers were worse than he thought. Out of a supposed 18-person roster, only 7 had clocked in more than twice in the last 2 weeks. He picked up the phone and called the HR director directly. I need a temporary support team deployed to store 9 today. Preferably from the training division. People who can run registers, manage stock, and don't need a walkthrough. I'll cover the cost from my discretionary fund. There was a pause on the other end, then a sharp, understood. Kellan hung up and drafted a store-wide memo. It wasn't formal. No branding, no boilerplate language, just a simple, direct message. You've been working without support for too long. That ends now. We're rebuilding this store properly starting today. If you're still here, it's because you care and I see that. He printed it, posted it on the break room door, and left the rest taped above the time clock. By the time the lights flickered on and the first shift arrived, Kellan was out of the office, walking the floor. It was a skeleton crew again: Craig, Taryn, and a part-time janitor named Lyle who usually worked weekends but had picked up the shift out of guilt. Taryn walked in, rubbing her wrist, the sleeve of her hoodie pushed up slightly. She looked surprised to see Kellan already on the floor. You're really here again, as long as it takes, he said, motioning for her to follow. Quick huddle. They gathered near the seasonal aisle, the only place wide enough to stand without blocking foot traffic. Kellan looked at all 3 of them. Here's where we're at. Temporary staff is coming in by noon. Until then, we hold the line. Craig, focus on front stock, only skip the back room. Lyle, I'll get you a headset and loop you into floor calls. Taryn, you're on register for the morning, then we rotate you off for restocking. Craig looked skeptical. No manager, I'll handle approvals. Anything that needs a key, find me. Taryn studied him. And after today, we start fixing what broke. That includes new leadership. The doors opened at 8. Customers began drifting in. Word hadn't spread yet, but the tone inside the store was already different. Taryn's lane moved faster. Craig had cleared 2 full aisles by mid-morning. When the first support staff arrived, 3 employees from neighboring locations and a senior trainer named Elise, they immediately fanned out and began helping without hesitation. By early afternoon, the store felt like it had exhaled. Kellan stepped outside briefly to take a call, then re-entered just as Elise was reviewing the break schedule. She approached him near the in-cap displays, clipboard in hand. "I've got a read on the team," she said. "Craig's sharp but needs direction. Taryn's a natural lead. She's already training one of ours without being asked. She's been keeping this place on its feet," Kellan said. "She's why I came here in the first place." Elise nodded once. "She's overdue for recognition." As the afternoon wore on, Kellan stayed visible, not giving orders but filling gaps. He ran small errands, helped zone the front aisles, and carried a stack of hangers from the fitting room to the back. He didn't want anyone thinking this was a show. It wasn't. By 4, the floor had stabilized. Customers weren't being ignored. The trash cans weren't full. Aisle signage had been replaced. For the first time in weeks, Store 9 felt like a retail space again. Kellan called another huddle near closing. Everyone gathered in the break room where the memo still hung above the clock. "Tomorrow," he said, "we bring in the district team. Not to audit, to listen. I want every one of you to speak honestly. What's broken, what's working, what needs to change. No sugarcoating." Craig leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You really think they'll listen?" "They will," Kellan said, "because I'll be in the room." Lyle looked around. "So what happens to the people who let this place fall apart?" "They're gone," Kellan said. "We're not patching holes. We're rebuilding." As the team dispersed to finish closing duties, Kellan motioned for Taryn to stay behind. She set down her notepad and waited. "I've got 2 questions," he said. "First, are you open to leading this store even temporarily?" Her eyes flickered. "Me, you know the operations, the team respects you, and you've already been doing the work." She hesitated, weighing the offer. "On one condition. Go on. I want control over hiring. I'm not running this place short-staffed again." "You'll have it," Kellan said. "And the second question, what do you need from me?" Taryn didn't rush her answer. "Don't disappear after today." Kellan nodded slowly. "I won't." The next morning, they met before opening. Taryn had a new name badge, temporary manager, printed on an adhesive label. Her old one sat in the trash, the scratched corner finally retired. She walked the floor before the doors opened, checking each section with the same care she had shown even before all of this began. The difference now was that people were watching her, listening. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. At 9 sharp, the district leads arrived. They gathered in the break room with notebooks and muted expressions, ready for another routine visit. Instead, they found Kellan already waiting. "No slides today," he said. "Just voices you haven't been hearing." One by one, the staff spoke, about being dismissed, ignored, overworked. About pride in what they did and how it felt to be treated like they didn't matter. Taryn spoke last. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. "This place wasn't failing because of the people on the floor," she said. "It was failing because no one cared enough to look." No one interrupted. When she finished, Kellan stood. "We're restructuring leadership, reworking the reporting chain, and implementing a quarterly floor audit by me, not a proxy. We're not letting this happen again." When the district team left, they didn't leave with notes, they left with instructions. Over the next 2 weeks, Store 9 transformed. New hires were brought in, trained directly by Elise's team. Taryn was officially promoted to store lead with a direct line to Kellan's office. Craig received a development plan and a raise, along with a part-time associate to back him up. Lyle stayed on weekends but now had proper shift coverage to clean the store without rushing. The changes weren't cosmetic. They were structural. On the final day of the second week, Kellan returned for one last unannounced visit. He walked the store quietly, wearing no badge, no headset, just a coat and a cup of coffee. He watched as a customer asked a question and was walked, not pointed, to the right aisle. He saw Craig kneeling on one knee, explaining a product to an elderly man. And at the front, Taryn stood beside a new hire, calmly explaining how to process a return. As he turned to leave, she noticed him and walked over. "You checking up on me?" "Checking in," Kellan said. "You don't need watching." She smiled and handed him a small, folded paper. "Something we started. It's a weekly log. Wins, challenges, team input, just in case you want to stay in the loop. He opened it. Clean handwriting, bullet points, honest notes. "This is good," he said. "You send this." "Every Friday." Kellan tucked it into his coat pocket. "Then I'll be reading every Friday." He left without fanfare, stepping out into the late afternoon light as the automatic doors slid shut behind him. Store 9 had been broken, but not beyond repair. And the people who'd held it together quietly, without thanks, were now the ones leading it forward.